I've always thought the earliest era of a long-running series was a fascinating topic. As the franchise goes on, a lot of series staples and a status quo are established, as the series develops its distinctive identity. But in the beginning, there are countless different ways you could branch away, literally limitless possibilities. So when I was looking at an old Sonic 1 advert the other day, I started thinking about the earliest days of Sonic's history, and I decided I wanted to look into all the Sonic media that came out before Sonic 2. Because I feel like Sonic 2 really set the direction of the franchise going forward, introducing Tails, the Tornado, Super Sonic, the Spin Dash, 30% of the stages in Sonic Frontiers. It's difficult to imagine the franchise without these things. But a lot of stuff was made in that first year, so let's talk about some of it. Let's dive into Sonic media predate Sonic 2 with... well, that feels a tad bit obvious. Sonic 1 is a really unique game in the series, following a much different design structure from its sequels. Since this game doesn't have the spin dash, it has a much larger focus on utilizing your environment to garner speed, rather than just having immediate access to it. It also features a ground speed cap, meaning most of the time you're playing the game at its pace, and speed and flow are more so achieved through consistency rather than it being handed to you. Not to say either structure is worse than the other, but Sonic 1 is a really different experience compared to literally anything post-Sonic 2. It's not a lot of people's cup of tea, but it's absolutely mine. Marble Zone is one of my favorite zones in the series, solely based on how fun it is to play it consistently. Knowing what jumps you can make to skip the waiting sections, making good cycles on the crushers. It's a perfect demonstration of everything I love about this game, while simultaneously being the very thing that turns a lot of people off. So sue me. I could talk about the things I love about Sonic 1 and its unique structure all day, but there's a lot I want to talk about other than just Sonic 1. So let's move on to something a bit more niche, the Sonic the Hedgehog story comic, a 3-volume manga made to promote the release of Sonic 1. Issue 1, Dr. Eggman's Challenges, begins by establishing the location of South Island, an island no man has ever seen nor heard of, before Eggman shows up, plotting to turn the island into his own fortress and conquer the world. One of his robots detects a Chaos Emerald on the island, a gem of unfathomable power which he plans to use to boil the world's biggest egg, his favorite food. You know, up until there, everything was lining up to the games, but this motivation is hilarious, so what the hell, sure. We cut to Green Hill Zone, where Sonic is performing with his band from the early concept art. And can I just say, he looks fucking perfect here. He's adorable, I love his fangs. Suddenly, Eggman starts bombing Sonic's concert, and the robots start attacking the attendees, so Sonic springs into actions, destroying Eggman's robots as payback for ruining his performance. Of the official origins for Sonic meeting Eggman, this is probably my favorite, even if it obviously doesn't align with current canon. I love the remnants of early concepts present in this issue. Issue 2 starts in Marble Zone, with Eggman beginning his plan to take down Sonic by capturing everyone on South Island and putting them into robots. Sonic is naturally angry and vows to save everyone and beat the heck out of Eggman. From there, the issue follows Sonic's navigating the traps of Marble Zone, Sparkling Zone, and Starland Zone, the latter two being the zone's names from earlier in Sonic 1's development. Of course, Sonic has another encounter with Eggman, culminating in Sonic freeing everyone from a capsule and Eggman flying off in a fit of rage. Issue 3 opens with Eggman lamenting how Sonic constantly ruins his plans, revealing his latest plan to lure Sonic by capturing Flicky, Pecky, and Rocky. Sonic arrives, and I don't know what this says in Japanese, but the fan translation I'm reading has Eggman's robots tell Sonic to fuck off, and I really wish I recorded myself reacting to this. Sonic, of course, tells him to fuck off in return and proceeds to Clockwork Zone to figure out where Eggman's been holding his friends. He falls into a trap, leading right into Labyrinth Zone, at the end of which Sonic encounters Eggman one final time, holding his friends hostage, threatening to crush them if Sonic doesn't let Eggman finish him off. Before Eggman has the chance to do anything, Sonic uses his speed to rescue his friends faster than Eggman can even process, and restores peace to South Island by making Eggman fuck off once and for all. Call me crazy for this, but I think this is my favorite Sonic comic I've ever read. Is it largely the beautiful artwork and my love for early Sonic stuff making me say that? Yeah, probably. But I love just how faithful it is to the material it had to go off of, even if some of the stuff it adapted wound up being scrapped. The final issue of this comic also includes an early origin story for Sonic. It surrounds a pilot named Henry Gordon, who's nicknamed Hedgehog and has a hedgehog emblem sewn to his track jacket, who died in an explosion after breaking the sound barrier. He was forgotten in favor of his friend, a man named Chuck, who safely broke the sound barrier, who was upset that his lost friend was buried in the shadow of history. So he decided to make sure he'd be remembered, starting to sport his jacket, which he named Sonic the Hedgehog. Other pilots started wearing the emblem too, and nobody who wore the emblem would ever get into an accident. 10 years later, Chuck meets Henry's daughter, a cameraman named Meg, and passed her father's jacket onto her. Later, when Meg was covering an aviation show while wearing the jacket, an accident occurred and Meg was caught in the fire, unable to escape. but while losing consciousness, she saw Sonic, leading her to safety. Eventually, Meg passed out, watching Sonic do the same finger wag gesture her father used to make. She later awakened in the hospital bed to find that the Sonic emblem on her father's jacket had disappeared. This story served as the basis for the later Mary Garnet origin story, which I briefly mentioned in my last video. Like I said there, this origin is probably the reasoning for Sonic's title emblem resembling an airline badge, which I think is interesting. It's definitely a weird origin. I think if I told anyone Sonic was the spirit of a fighter pilot who protected those who continued his memory, they'd look at me like I'd lost my mind. But I think it's neat that you can still see little influences of it in the games, you know? Like Sonic having a plane, for instance. And I'm not sure who pointed this out initially because Twitter's search feature is garbage, but I've also seen someone point out that the way Sonic meets Elise in 06 parallels Meg in several ways. A girl trapped, surrounded by flame, rescued by a hedgehog who's reminiscent of someone from 10 years past. It's more likely than not a coincidence, but it's still kind of a neat parallel. I also think the name Chuck being used for Henry's close friend is a neat coincidence, considering that's the name of Sonic's uncle in the early American media. Speaking of American media, Sega of America made their own Sonic 1 promotional comic, simply titled Sonic the Hedgehog. It's largely adapted from the American Sonic Bible, which I covered in detail in my video on American Sonic media, so let's be brief to keep from sounding like a broken record. The comic opens with Sonic fighting Robotnik in Green Hill and making him eat dirt. He rescues some of his animal friends, who tell Sonic that he needs to find Kintobor, since he'll know how to deal with Robotnik, and Sonic explains that Robotnik is Kintobor. From there, Sonic explains the Kintobor origin story, that Sonic was an ordinary hedgehog before meeting a man named Obi Kintobor who plans to steal all the world's evil in the Chaos Emeralds, befriending him and then turning blue after running on Kintobor's supersonic treadmill. An accident occurs with Kintobor's machine, causing him to fuse the rotten egg and the evil in the emeralds and turn to the evil Dr. Robotnik. Sonic gives chase to Robotnik and finds himself at the special stage. Oh, sorry, Sonic enters the Warp of Confusion and finds the Chaos Emerald. He continues his pursuit of Robotnik until he winds up in Scrap Brain Zone, where Robotnik tells him to pick between the Chaos Emerald and the life of Porker Lewis, who's on a conveyor belt headed towards a saw blade. Sonic, of course, saves Porker Lewis, giving up the emerald to Robotnik, who gets away, but not before Sonic destroys his Badnik transforming machine. From there, it says the story continues in the game, which leads me to question why in this version of events, Sonic decided to just run back to Green Hill when he was already in Scrap Brain. I also noticed both this and the Sonic the Hedgehog story comic have Sonic directly talking to the animals he rescues, which I think is kind of interesting, considering that never happens anymore. I guess back then they were pretty much the only characters you had to work with for something like this. Alright, that was pretty much all the notable Sonic 1 promo stuff. Now we can move on to That's Just Sonic 1 Again! Sonic 1 8-bit released a couple months after the Genesis version, and is comparatively a pretty simplified experience. The levels are almost completely linear. The closest thing you're gonna get to the Genesis version is Jungle Zone Act 1 having a top and bottom path. You also can't recollect your rings, and the game completely lacks any sort of loops. But, to the game's credit, I wasn't really thinking about how compromised it was while playing it. Something I think is to this game's benefit is the fact that it isn't really trying to be the Genesis version. Sure, you've got 3 zones from the Genesis version here, but the other half are original zones, and even the zones from the 16-bit counterpart are pretty different from their equivalents. Because of this, it doesn't feel like I'm playing Sonic 1 but worse, it just feels like I'm playing a different game. And for what it's worth, it's a decent game. I really wish they gave you rings for the fuck-ass bosses though. And it'd also be nice if Labyrinth Zone had a frame rate measured in frames per second rather than seconds per frame. Okay, now that we're past Sonic 1 for real this time, let's talk about the Sonic manga series. For those not familiar, the various Sonic Shogakukan mangas ran from April 1992 through till 1994, though obviously for this video I'm only going to be covering stuff that came out prior to November of 1992. From my research, only one of these series has an English fan translation, that being the Korokoro comic specials. There were actually way more than that though, and I mean a lot more. There were 6 other major series, which were released in the Shogakukan Learning Journal magazines, grades 1 through 6. I gotta be honest, I don't really feel up to using image translate on every single page of 6 separate manga, so I'm just going to be talking about the specials which are actually translated. Most of the early Learning Journal comics seem to follow the same general plotline anyways, but with varying degrees of simplicity depending on their grade. Nikki and his girlfriend Amy are hanging out, then Anton Veruca shows up to spoil their time together, causing Nikki to transform into Sonic the Hedgehog and take him out. Nikki is unaware that he's actually Sonic, though. Something that I do think is kind of interesting, though, is that the 2nd and 6th grade versions of the comic use an entirely different design for Amy and Nikki as opposed to the others. which has have them be nearly identical to their game equivalents. And yes, this is Amy Rose's debut, a whole year before her appearance in Sonic CD. This also marks the first appearances of Vector, Charmy, Mighty, and Ray, years before their respective debuts. Anyways, the first issue of the Korokoro specials follows a similar format to the Learning Journal stories. Nikki, his sister Tanya, and Amy are hanging out at a pizza place in Hedgehog Town. But right before they can start eating their pizza, Anton ruins it with the car's exhaust and starts forcing himself on Amy. Nikki tries to stand up to Anton, but he's too cowardly and gets knocked away. Nikki laments being such a weakling compared to his father and proclaims that he wants to be strong. Then, he transforms into Sonic the Hedgehog and turns Anton into a lizard pizza. Sonic then turns back into Nikki with no memory of ever being Sonic, and Amy tells him about her rescuer. In case you couldn't tell yet, this version of Sonic definitely took some creative liberties, to say the least. Eggman, masquerading as a police officer, witnessed the whole thing, saying he's been searching for Sonic for many years, which would seem to imply Nikki has been turning into Sonic for a long time in spite of not even knowing who Sonic is until Amy tells him. Anyways, Eggman sees that there's some connection between Sonic and Nikki, and convinces Anton to harass Nikki again to lure out Sonic. So while Amy and Nikki are on a boat together, Anton knocks Sonic into the water and starts harassing Amy again, causing Sonic to come out once more, just as Eggman predicted. Eggman sends out his greatest creation in any incarnation of the franchise, Mr. Cookman #1, to capture Sonic by firing eggs at him and trapping him in a giant eggshell. Eggman tries to boil the egg, but Sonic breaks out in time, using his spin attack to capture Eggman in a whirlpool of water and eggs. And I gotta say, I know he's literally the same guy as Sonic, but I can't help but feel bad for Nikki. This guy he hasn't even met shows up and saves his girlfriend one time, and she's already thinking about how much better Sonic is than him. Nikki tried, okay? He might not have the courage, but he tried, the poor guy. And in the very next issue, she agrees to go on a date with whoever wins an Iron Man race between Nikki and Anton, while knowing he can't swim. But you know what Nikki does? With a word of encouragement from his father, he tries his very best. He doesn't give up. Nikki, little man, little hedgehog man, you're braver than you give yourself credit for, okay? I know I said I was only doing stuff before Sonic 2, but I also need to mention the fact that the issue Tails is introduced in has everyone turn into mushrooms, and for some reason Tails is depicted as this bad boy with sunglasses. Also, the first line of this issue is the sun saying, "Autumn is here," and I don't really like that the writers anticipated my arrival 13 years before my birth. This series is pretty ridiculous, but I think that's sort of the appeal. I love all the insanely over-the-top ways Sonic defeats Anton, like when Anton trashes the speaker Sonic is using, so Sonic uses him as the speaker. Anyways, next up is, how many Sonic 1s are there? I gotta be honest, I don't have much to say about this one. Tiger Electronics' Sonic the Hedgehog is an LCD handheld game which is meant to be
Sonic fun for kids on the run!
Sonic runs through stages and you need to defeat Badniks and beat Eggman at the end, rewarding you with an emerald and amping up the difficulty. It's got about as much depth as you would expect from a Tiger LCD handheld, but the kid in the ad seems to enjoy it. Serious question, as someone who wasn't alive in the era these were relevant, were these things ever enough to keep a kid busy for longer than a few minutes? I can't imagine having played this extensively as a kid. Maybe I was just spoiled by my GBA. Sonic Eraser was a glimpse of what the future would look like. And let me tell ya, it sure didn't look bright. It required you to have a Sega MegaNet subscription and the Sega Mega Modem in order to download it over the internet. Imagine needing to pay a subscription to play a Sonic game on a device you already bought, instead of just being able to buy the game and have it. That's just ridiculous. Being a downloadable title from 1991, it's incredibly simplistic. You're given an assortment of multicolored blocks and you need to match them to build combos. And when you successfully do so, your Sonic punches the other Sonic in the face, leaving them dazed and unable to control their placements. Now, I do have to admit, I suck ass at puzzle games, so literally anything that looks like a coherent, thought-out move going on in the background is completely an accident. Whenever I did try to do something, I'd just panic and fuck up the placement. At one point, I think the game took pity on my inability to play it, because I got stunned and Sonic, in his stunned state whilst I had no control, did a 4x combo for me. Thanks, Sonic. Waku Waku Sonic Patrol Car is a game that I have no idea how to segue into. You know those little children's ride games you'd see at the malls? This is one of those. The game's only about 2 minutes long, and it centers around Sonic as a police officer on traffic patrol, avoiding vehicles. At the end, you run into Eggman, who's knocking cars off the road. So like any self-respecting police officer, you blow up his car with him inside and let him get away. Something I thought was funny was that when I tried to drive safely, not hitting any vehicles or speeding, I got a worse rank than when I just spammed my boost and ran into way more cars than Eggman did. Rules for thee, but not for me, I guess. I thought it was interesting that this game uses songs directly from Sonic 1, since Sega needs to pay Nakamura music royalties whenever they use his tracks. That's the reason why they don't use Green Hill or Chemical Plants tracks in Forces or Frontiers, and why they always use the Sonic 3 victory jingle rather than the Sonic 1 and 2 one. But I guess this mall car game was worth the cost. Serious question, does Sonic 2 count as coming out before Sonic 2? As in, the 8-bit version specifically, which came out a month before the Genesis version. Because I know when I said Sonic 2 at the start, absolutely nobody was thinking of this version, but it is also quite literally called Sonic the Hedgehog 2. I'm going to count it, because this game feels almost entirely divorced from the Genesis version. It's more of a direct sequel to one 8-bit than a translation of Genesis Sonic 2. The only thing from that version that makes the leap is Tails, and he kind of feels like a last-minute addition, considering his only role is to be kidnapped. From what I've seen online, I believe the general consensus surrounding this game is as one of the worst of the 8-bit Sonic titles, but honestly, I think this game is a pretty big step up from the first 8-bit title. It has almost none of the compromises of the first. It has loops, breakable walls, alternate pathways, more interesting level gimmicks. You can recollect your rings. For all intents and purposes, this is a feature-complete classic title. I loved Gimmick Mounted Zone in particular. All the platforming flows together super well. It's got that same sort of appeal Marble Zone has for me, where playing it consistently is super fun. My biggest complaint is really just the levels are ludicrously short. I wasn't playing optimally whatsoever, and I still finished most of the levels in a minute or less. Even late into the game, I finished Gimmick Mountain 2 in 45 seconds. And good lord, Scramble Egg Zone isn't fun. I wouldn't call it difficult, more so just annoying. It's essentially a pipe maze, and even while pause buffering to make it easier, getting where I was trying to go was annoying as hell. I find the bosses here to be generally less of a pain than the first 8-bit title. Some of them seem intimidating at first, but they're generally pretty predictable. The Sea Lion boss is pretty funny because he won't walk all the way up to you, so you kinda just stare at him until he lets you hit him. My word of advice if you plan to play this game though is not to bother with the emeralds. The final zone you unlock isn't anything special, and the final boss just involves waiting in a tube until Eggman's attacks go away for 3 minutes straight. It's not fun. I think that covers pretty much everything of note released prior to Sonic 2, but please let me know if I forgot anything. My favorite part of making videos like this is getting to expand my Sonic knowledge, learning new things about this franchise that it sometimes feels like I've seen every facet of. Also, sorry I didn't upload for 6 months, I just could not come up with a video idea that I actually liked for the life of me. I kid you not, I wrote like 9 different scripts to varying degrees of completion that I just was not happy with. So if you don't want me to take 6 months to upload again, feel free to throw ideas my way. I can't guarantee I'll actually do them, but maybe your suggestion will give me a train of thought that leads me to some other idea, I don't know. Anyways, I don't know how to end this video.